Good afternoon, and welcome to our panel discussion of the economic impact of COVID-19 in the Latinx community. Today, panelists will address the economic status and mobility of the Latinx and Hispanic communities pre-COVID, how the current economic downturn is impacting small businesses and household income, and where we go from here to address these disparities and improve outcomes for these communities. But before we get into it, we do have some upcoming programs that we'd like to make you aware of. On October 12th, this coming Monday, we have Spirit, a focus on Indigenous art, artists, and issues. So please register for that and join us. Also, there is a new Equitable Dinners coming up. And this one is a virtual conversation about racial equity and democracy. So we hope you're able to join us in Equitable Dinners on October 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. And we also have free admission this month by the generous gift from Porsche. And tickets must be reserved in advance. It is first come, first served, so check out our website and get your tickets now. And just a friendly reminder that all comments of the moderators and guests of our programs represent the thoughts of each individual and do not represent an official position of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. With that, it is my distinct honor to introduce our moderator for today, Jessica M. Martinez. She is the Director of Development at the Latin American Association.
Thank you so much, Cam, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation on the economic impact of COVID-19 in the Latinx community. And also, as you're tuning in today and any questions come up, please feel free to ask questions in the chat and we'll get to them later today, or later in the program. So it is my pleasure now to introduce Gigi Pedraza, who's the Executive Director and founder of the Latino Community Fund, as well as Ana Gonzalez, who's a Senior Researcher at the Pew Research Center. So Gigi, can you tell us a little bit about the Latino Community Fund?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. The Latino Community Fund, it's a grant-making public charity. We are a membership organization with over 40 members across the state. They're all Latino-led, Latino-serving, and Latino-governed. We do basically three things: amplifying our voice, which is advocacy, civic participation, advancing knowledge of who we are as a community. The second one is capacity building, ensure that our organizations are effective and growing, and we support them with technical assistance, workshops, and individual coaching free for our members. And the third one is collective investments. And so from programmatic grants to scholarships to COVID relief, our fund, we raised $1.5 million, specifically focusing on mixed status families, undocumented folks, and agricultural workers and poultry plant workers this year. So that's in summary what we do, and very happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gigi. Quite a lot, and thank you so much for making a difference in our community. Anna, can you tell us a little bit about the Pew Research Center?
Of course. The Pew Research Center is a nonprofit organization. We call ourselves a fact tank instead of a think tank. We mostly produce data based on our own polling and research that we do based on census data and other government data. Some of the topics we research is US politics, Hispanics or Latinos in the US, religion in the US and internationally, global affairs, and also the use of technology and the use of science, and among others.
Well, thank you, Anna, and thank you to you and your team for all the work that we do, because, you know, with the research, we couldn't know what we needed to do. So let's just get into it. And again, a reminder for everyone, as you're tuning in, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. So even before the pandemic, the Pew Research Center's data shows that the Hispanic community cited the economy as one of the nation's most important issues. Historically, what have been some of the economic barriers that the Hispanic community has faced? So that's for either one of y'all to answer. So who would like to take that question?
Anna, I think.
Yeah. Sure, definitely. So the Hispanic community is today, they make up 18% of the population in the US. They are the largest minority group in the US, it has been growing very rapidly, particularly in the decades of the 90s and the 2000s. It grew very rapidly, less rapidly now. Most Latinos are US born today, and they have done a lot of improvements in terms of school attendance and income levels, but they are still behind other groups in these two areas. So I would say those are some of the main challenges.
Well, thank you, Ana. So what do you think, are these barriers the same now or have they changed since the pandemic began?
Well, the Latinos have been one of the hardest hit groups during the pandemic, not only because higher rates of mortality when they get the virus or a higher rate of contagion of the virus, but also economically, they have been the hardest hit. The unemployment for Latinos grew faster than for other groups during the pandemic. And we also, in our surveys, we saw that there was a higher share of them that say that they personally had lost a job or somebody in their household had lost a job and had a pay cut during the pandemic and because of the pandemic.
How about you, Gigi? Have you seen any other barriers as well?
Yes, I think that it's important to recognize that Latinos vary depending on the state, right? And their realities are also affected by, state policies. So for example, state policies and the state demographics. So for example, in Georgia, Latinos that are adults, right, over 30 years old, like me, are mostly immigrants and that are English learners, right? We came as adults right after the Olympics. And so we are seeing the first generation of native born. And of course, Ana is absolutely right. It's 50% almost, right? We're evenly distributed as, native born and not in Georgia. But then when you have a significant portion of the community that are not citizens or recent immigrants like me, that are also parents, we face additional barriers, like for example, language access in states like Georgia that are English only and are not necessarily intentional at making language, accessible, language lines accessible for immigrants or for Latinos in Spanish, Portuguese, and of course, native languages. I think something else is access to healthcare that has been, limited, because Georgia didn't expand Medicaid, of course. We also have a limit, not a limit, but a waiting period of 5 years. So even permanent legal residents in Georgia have to wait 5 years to access, state-sponsored and federal-sponsored healthcare. So, these are barriers that have been exacerbated with COVID-19, and of course, we're seeing the consequences. Like Ana said, right, in Georgia, we are 10% of the population, but over 21% of all the positive cases.
Well, thank you, Gigi. So, for these economic impacts on these barriers, so I know that at the Latin American Association, we've seen a lot of financial assistance that's needed, and a lot of people that are facing homelessness, because of COVID and what the impact it's made in their, jobs. A lot of Latinos have been essential workers, and then a lot of them have had their jobs cut. Gigi, have you seen any other similar situations as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, overwhelmingly Latinos are, overrepresented in, as essential workers, particularly in Georgia. We know nationally, of course, but particularly in Georgia. But we also know that these essential workers, right, oftentimes are contractors or, a part of a cash economy that do not have access to any of the economic, really, relief efforts. So for example, cannot apply for unemployment or cannot benefit from, the check, right, that was approved as part of the CARES Act because it was, excluding mixed status families and undocumented families. And in Georgia, that's 600,000 people. So, financial assistance, we have also been doing that. It's, it's still a huge need. Housing, I mean, there's the very real, possibility to have thousands and thousands of people evicted, right, after December 31st. And we're already seeing a huge concern and a huge impact in our community. I would tell you that from the financial assistance that we have provided, and we focus again on undocumented mixed status families and entrepreneurs, almost 42% of all the expenses, because we are able to track how people spend dollars, is in food. People are hungry, right? And if you are hungry, you cannot do anything, right? And if you're sick, it's worse. The second percentage, which is like 3%, is to pay utilities and debt and rent, right? And so I'll stop there.
Yeah, Gigi, you know, we've seen the same thing at the Latin American Association. I know both of our organizations have been doing food drives, and it's been, you know, we did one just yesterday, and within an hour, we had dispersed all the food we had. So we definitely see that need. Ana, have you seen any other things that, you know, may coincide with Gigi's saying, you know, research-wise?
Well, I actually forgot to mention another barrier that we have seen among Latinos, and that's healthcare coverage. They are also the group that are less likely to have health insurance, particularly those who are undocumented or immigrants.
Absolutely. So I think there, you know, just with what we've seen with some of our partners, there is opportunities out there, you know, for people to get checked. And it is very important to see how, you know, how people are doing. And COVID testing, I know, Gigi, you've done quite a bit with that and making sure the community has access, whether documented or not. Do you want to tell a little bit about that as well? Because I feel that's a barrier, you know, especially with COVID, you know, people not getting tested, and then it spreads, and it, you know, that's how it, you know, the numbers continue to go up.
I think, frankly, the barrier is fear and distrust of the community, and that shows in different ways, right? So when you have to pre-register to get a test and, you know, click a box that says your information will be shared, you know, people are reticent, right? And I mean, rightfully so. You know, and this is, by the way, not only the Latino community, this is a lot of communities are afraid to share personal information. So, public charge is also a very real challenge for a lot of our families, you know, with the hope of regularizing their situation, when you know that if you apply for some government sponsored programs or state sponsored programs, you know, you may then, you know, may not qualify to regularize your situation or that of your loved ones. It's a real challenge, but again, it's fear. So, you know, with the COVID testing, we partner with CORE and with Emory and with other organizations to ensure that, you know, we bring testing where there are high density of, you know, Latinx community members, and that is, you know, available and accessible. So, you know, walk in, drive into, and, you know, we're volunteers and public health specialists to speak the language, that is free and no registration. So just walk in, and that's one way in which people feel comfortable. But Jessica, let's not forget that it's not only testing, but it's also the access to the follow-up care, right? If somebody is positive and then we say, okay, you know, stay at home, and if you get bad, you know, you then may have to go to the hospital and, you know, get a bill of, you know, $200,000 like we have been seeing lately. You know, that is a deterrent from people to seek help, and help, and then they just wait until, you know, it's very late. And that may be one of the reasons why we see a lot of mortality in our community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gigi. Ana, do you have anything to, you know, add to that as well?
No, in our surveys, we also saw that Hispanics were the group that were the most worried about getting sick themselves or actually getting somebody else sick. They were not the ones reporting the highest level of having been infected or having somebody in their household to be infected, but they were the most worried about it.
Okay, well, thank you, Ana. So Gigi, you talked a little bit about some of the barriers like speaking English, and Ana, you spoke about some other barriers of the economic impact. So the unemployment rate in the Hispanic community spiked in April, and it increased among Hispanic women. Why is this? Do you have any idea why it could be that it's, you know, more with Latino women?
I think it has to do with the type of jobs that they hold. Many women are frontline workers. They are cleaning in the cleaning industry. They don't work in places like, for example, construction. We actually also saw a lot of people, even in the healthcare industry, losing jobs. So it's the type of jobs that they hold. And also some of them may have had to drop out because of childcare needs. So that could be another thing that could be a factor there.
Absolutely, that's what we've been seeing as well. You know, for childcare has been huge, with people, either the mother or father having to be home, especially with digital learning, and now school's opening up, it's changing a little bit, but that definitely has been something we've seen. What about you, Gigi? Have you seen any, can you add anything to that, or have you seen anything a little different, or does it kind of coincide with Anna's saying?
I think I 100% agree with like Anna is saying. I mean, data is saying, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah,
so, yeah. I agree with that. I also think that, there is a significant portion of our community that, relies on, on an economic sort of model that, and we know this because of the entrepreneurship work that we do with, both the Latin American Chamber of Commerce, the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce too. There is a group of folks, right, particularly women, that sell things, right? They are in business and they are self-employed because they sell things, they cook things, they make things, and they usually go to markets to sell these things and make ends meet, right? And we consider them entrepreneurs and we consider them small businesses because there's also different ways how you define who's in business and who's not in business, but for us they are, right? If you're in a commercial activity, you are a business owner, an entrepreneur. And so when you have, really estate closed or, because of, just COVID-19 mitigation measures, you no longer have access to those markets, or you don't have the money to put gas in your car, then you, of course, are no longer able to be employed, right? Self-employ yourself, right? And feed your family. So that's another sort of compounding, I think, challenge that we have.
Thank you, Gigi, for sharing. So one thing that we have seen is we've seen some Latinas, that may not have been working, and now they are. With the online, Etsy and other, mobile or, digital ways to sell, we've seen a little bit of an increase in entrepreneurship in Latinas. Not a lot, but, I think maybe typically Latinas that were not working have been seeing this, or they've pivoted their, current role or past roles to do something else. Anna, have you seen any research like that as well?
No, we have not. We have not focused on entrepreneurship so far.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, at the Latin American Association, we have a Latina entrepreneurship program. And so actually now that we went digital with all our classes, we had a 3 times increase in our participation in our classes. So I think people are trying to get access. I think people are searching for ways that they can, do more, especially now in the time of COVID where, so much job loss. So thank you guys for sharing. So Gigi, can you share a little bit about the Latino Community Fund's recent survey that focused on undocumented entrepreneurs in Georgia and what your findings showed?
Yeah, so as part of our COVID relief and recovery efforts, we wanted to be very intentional in designing around the most vulnerable communities. A lot of the recovery efforts, and I'm sure Anna can talk about this, right, historically have focused and benefited communities that were already emerging, right, from the crisis, or were communities that have access to power and capital and therefore are able to secure, economic relief measures. So we wanted to make sure that we focus on this community where entrepreneurship is actually survival entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship, it's a self-sufficiency strategy for survival. And so we were able to raise, $50,000 from the Candida Fund and Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation, and 100% distribute, $1,000 grants to undocumented entrepreneurs that were directly affected by COVID-19. And so we did some data collection as part of the screening, and what we found is that, there are some stereotypes on who's undocumented, right? And how we look and everything, and what we found is that it's a very diverse community. Over 31%, right, have higher degrees of educational degrees. But then 34% work in our own homes. So oftentimes, we say, who are they? Who are these people, right? And then as a fundraiser, oftentimes, I'm, going out and asking for dollars, and they're like, but we don't know who they are. We actually do. They are in our homes, right? 34% of them work in our homes, and 55% they drive around to sell their products. A lot of them, right, have professional occupations. 63% of them have bank accounts, but also when we ask the question, how do you plan to spend the money? They all overwhelmingly wanted to buy supplies and PPE to go back to work or to retool so that they could, continue to provide for their families. 100% of them, and I should disclose, this is the data from the applicants, right? Which is over 200 applicants that we received. So this is not sort of a census of undocumented folks in Georgia. This is just a sample of the applicants of the effort. 100% of them have dependents, and 90% of them have annual revenues of under $40,000. 73% of them are women.
Wow, overwhelming amount of women there as well. So what was done during or after the 2009 recession to aid the Hispanic and Latinx communities? And do you think these actions will have the same impact during or after the COVID-19 recession?
For me, the question?
And either one of you. Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Anna, if you wanna, you have some data probably.
No, I don't. Well, during the recession, we saw a big package of stimulus going out from the government, and the economy kicked up again. Latinos were, I think, the slowest ones to recover from that, from the recession, and they were actually still trailing others in terms of unemployment before this latest downturn. I don't think the current economic package could be compared to the one from the Great Recession. It's quite different. There might be more things to come, but it is quite different. It did include some temporary measures for unemployed, for people with unemployment that we didn't see during the recession that I think benefited a lot of people. But of course, that did not benefit people without authorization, living in the US without documents. And we also saw the checks that they were sent to families under a certain income that also did not benefit immigrants without authorization. But many Latinos did benefit from those reliefs this time.
Great. Gigi, do you have anything to add to that as well?
The only thing that I would add is that I think even if you are not legally present, right, in the US, you still can incorporate a business. And so there are ways where, entrepreneurship is a way where people are, not only contributing, to their families, but contributing, with their taxes and everything, as undocumented folks. And the ability for these entrepreneurs to be able to access contracts or to get business licenses also varies by state. So the opportunity of recovery, it's also going to be, I guess, defined by state policy. So for example, in Georgia, there is a mandate, a provision that if you're undocumented, even, you can incorporate with the IRS, you can be a successful business owner, pay your taxes, you cannot get a business license. You have to, in Georgia, you have to sign an affidavit where you are basically swearing that yes, you are legally present. So, you can lie. You also are not able to access any contracts or any of these, efforts or packages, available by the state in recovery because they all require a business license. And so in Georgia, you just can't get a business license. So that's a challenge, particularly that, entrepreneurs, undocumented entrepreneurs, business owners faced in Georgia, that is a barrier for recovery too.
Interesting. So, we've talked about quite a bit of different things, with just the economic impact and, the barriers, Gigi, you just covered one. So how do you think the economic impact of COVID-19 will affect other areas of well-being and mobility? We talked a little bit about the current situation. So how do you think it's going to go, going forward? How will it affect other areas? And that's for either of y'all.
Well, I think we will have to see how the economy recovers after this and to what measure Latinos are able to go back to work in the same jobs or different jobs that they held before the pandemic. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen because we don't really know when this is going to end. We don't know what it's going to look like after the pandemic, and we also don't know what the government is going to do for the people after the pandemic and during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
I think for us, housing is a huge concern. A lot of the policy efforts and relief efforts are around affordable housing and, government sponsored programs that, again, when you have a significant number of community members that, would not be able to qualify or, rent rooms inside homes or, are in trailer parks, it's just very concerning. And, without a stable housing and, a shelter, we can't do much, right? You can't shower to go look for a job. How do you take care of your kids? The other thing, in NALCA, the National Association of Latino Asset Builders, actually issued a report in October that noted that while high earning occupations and jobs, were recovering and had started to recover, I think since last couple months, for employees that have an hourly rate of $20 and less, still, the market had not recovered. So these are, again, the most vulnerable folks. So, we are very, very concerned. I don't have answers. We are actively working in scenario planning and see, what we can do as an organization and then collectively as a community to help mitigate this effort. But it's going to be ugly. I mean, it is already, right? And it's going to get worse, I think, before it gets better, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So you both kind of just touched on a few things, and you both kind of touched on, we don't know, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in a month, really, because, COVID is a new beast for us. So based on just the work that you've done and kind of thinking long term, what do you believe will be some of the lasting impacts that COVID will have on the Latinx community? We've touched on a few things that have impacted it now, but do you think it's going to continue? Both scenarios of whether, COVID gets better at the end of this year, or if it's much longer. And then I'm also talking about economic and non-economic impacts. Can y'all talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think some of the economic impacts might take a while or a long time to erase, if we ever do. We're seeing some of the effects of the Great Recession right now, more than 10 years later. So I think we will continue to see the economic effects for a while. Hopefully they will get erased at some point. I think that some of the women that dropped out of the labor force might not come back. We might see a drop in the number and the share of women who participate in the labor force, those who are working. And also some people might have to shift industries, because I think it's possible that some of the jobs might just completely shuffle in the future. We don't know how long theaters, restaurants, and other commerces are going to be able to not operate normally. And this is also going to change some of the jobs of Latinos.
Thank you, Ana. What about you, Gigi? What do you think?
So I said it was going to get worse, right? Before it's good, but I believe in a silver lining, right? And I believe that, as a community, I don't think there's been an opportunity to show how strong we are and how much we contribute, right, to this nation and to the states and to the localities that we have. I also think that, it's very clear the power that we have as a community, and I'm really hoping and I see every day, how people are making the connection between their lives policies and civic participation. And right, and to me, this is an opportunity for people to get more engaged. And I do think people will get more engaged, right, in having a say on what happens in their communities, knowing that what's happening today and what's going to happen at the end of the year and, you know, during the redistricting process, right, next summer is going to have, you know, an impact that's going to last at least a decade. So, you know, to me, this is all not specifically, you know, economic, because, you know, that's Ana's expertise, but it is all connected. We know that folks that participate civically, you know, communities that participate civically at higher numbers, you know, have, you know, great gains, you know, for a number of reasons, right? Legislators, you know, policies start reflecting those who participate. And so, you know, for us, I think there is a great opportunity, and it's sort of like this is our time, right? That's what I say. So it's gonna get bad, but there's also a silver lining, and I am, you know, motivated and working to ensure that people, you know, see that window of opportunity too.
Well, thank you, Gigi and Ana. So just as a reminder to our viewers, you know, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and we can get Gigi and Ana can ask any or answer any of your questions when we wrap up in a few minutes with our questioning. So, you know, both of you guys discussed, you know, kind of, I think the overarching is resiliency. You know, I think the Latino community in general is very resilient. I think as a whole, you know, our country has become very resilient. We've learned how to pivot with, you know, what's going on in the community. So how do you think that's going to impact long-term? Do you think we might have more people that are, you know, Ana, you talked a little bit about people joining different workforces or transitioning what they're currently doing. Do you think we're going to have more Latinos, and Gigi, you talked a little bit about policy and, you know, getting more involved in the community. So do you think we're going to have Latinos kind of changing where there's more entrepreneurship? They're definitely seeking other areas that they might not have been typically looking at, like it's having us look at things differently. Do you think that's going to be something we're going to be seeing a lot more often?
I think particularly with the reliance on the internet, nowadays we see a lot of people working remotely, not just from home, but a lot of people moved to a different state and continued working, those who could. And also I think this opened a few doors for new businesses, for new opportunities, for people to become entrepreneurs. So I do think there could be a shift towards that area, a shift towards entrepreneurship, but also I think some of the jobs might shift, might become more virtual than they were before.
Thank you, Ana. And you know, you do bring up a good point about the digital aspect. You know, right now we're on Zoom. All of our viewers are probably at home too, maybe in their PJs. But you know, I do know from the Latin American Association, a lot of the clients that we see don't have access to computers. They don't have access to internet. So that is another barrier. So what do you think the impact of that has been? Gigi, for you, what do you think? And what have you seen in our community?
I think you're absolutely right, Jessica. Particularly in South Georgia, for example, right now we have a team of 4 navigators and, you know, outreach and educators that are going in person, right? In teams of 2, of course, for safety. And we had to do that, not because we like to put our own people at risk, simply because there is not enough broadband. And so how are people even supposed to ask for help or to find where there is, you know, COVID testing, or, you know, if a doctor office is open, if there is no access to broadband internet, or if they are, you know, an agricultural worker that the transportation depends on their employer. So it's very real in South Georgia, and it is very real, you know, in Beaufort Highway, right next to the Latin American Association, as well as, you know, in North Georgia and everywhere. You know, there are 2 pieces. There is the digital sort of literacy, right, and access to the tools and the equipment, but there is the connectivity issue, which is, you know, the broadband issue and everything. So both are a reality, and we see that with kids in school. Ser Familia, one of our grantees and member organizations that have done a wonderful you know, work in Cobb County, Gwinnett County too. They did a survey, and they found that 82% of all the children in the families that they serve do their homework in their parents' phones. And of course, when the kid is doing, the homework in the parent phone, how is the mom supposed to find where to find food or a job, right? Or make an appointment for something. So that is a reality. And I know that school systems, for example, have done, a great job, done their best, right, to distribute Chromebooks and everything. But, Chromebooks are very cheap. They break all the time. Mine, I have 2 children. One of my children, has done nothing particularly bad. And the Chromebook has broke twice already, right? We do have an extra computer at home, but, had we not had one, she would have been one of those kids making their homework in my phone, on my phone. And, we are a middle-class Latino family living right outside the city of Atlanta. So you can imagine what other families go through. And still, there is, DeKalb County has, thousands of children, and they had only distributed, 2,000 hotspots. Great, and now we are working with them actively to ensure that more are distributed. But the gap still exists. I mean, it's huge, and it's, a literacy gap, a connectivity gap, and a digital access gap that, we see everywhere from students to, to adults.
Well, thank you, Gigi. That does bring up a good point, and I can tell you one thing that we've seen is, of course, the access is there, and you talked a little bit about the cab and the computers, but it's the knowledge. So a lot of parents didn't even know that they could have access to, some type of digital learning for their children. And, for us too, we've been working, I guess at the beginning of the summer and, beginning of pandemic, everything was through the phone. Everything was through WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. Most of our clients didn't know really how to use a computer, how to get on the internet. So there is that divide there as well that I think we're seeing. I think it's getting better. And a lot of it is reliance on the children to help the communication piece. So, we talked about barriers. That's definitely one there. And I see a couple questions pop up. So before we go to the questions, I did want to kind of end with, is there anything else that you guys would like to share before we wrap up and take more questions? We did talk about a lot of different things today. So any other last kind of comments or, something that you want to make sure to share to our audience?
No, I think I'm ready for the questions.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you guys so much. So let me pull up the chat because now I accidentally pressed X. So Elizabeth is asking, so in our school district, our bilingual parent resource specialists are seeing an increased level of Latinx parent engagements in parent workshops on Zoom. We are collaborating with school social workers and our educational foundation to meet the needs of the community, including food, computers, and internet access. Do you have specific suggestions for those in the public education as we work to support our Latinx students and their families?
Oh, this is a great question. Thank you, Elizabeth. So we convene a K-12 English learner table, and the Latin American Association, of course, is a member of that table. And we have been working, specifically to ensure that, kids and parents are engaged and to, track, what students are not, joining the classes and everything, ensuring food access and distribution through the school systems. And one of the things that we found out this year, and shame on us, right, because we should have known this, right, before, is that, for example, access to Infinite Campus, which is a platform overwhelmingly used by different states, so all of Georgia, this is a Georgia problem, right? This is not a county problem, requires the 4 numbers of a parent, Social Security or children's Social Security, to access this platform that allows engagement from parents and everything, right? And so because, when this platform and the agreement, whatever, was not, what was signed, and it was not centered on, communities where this is a barrier to access, right? We just came up with it. So there was a workaround that we were able to find that requires a parent to go to the school and present, a number of, documents and make an appointment. And so this is an example on how we need to review everything that we are doing with a critical eye, right? With the lens of a limited English learner, but also an immigrant, right? Particularly in Georgia, for Latinos, adult Latinos in Georgia, right? This is a lens that we need to, including everything that we do to ensure that we are not putting a barrier. The same with food distribution. A lot of food distribution was done drive-through. And, even by schools. Well, what happens when you are too poor to own a car, or you are unable to get a driver's license because you are an undocumented parent of an American citizen? Literally, we're asking people to break the law and to put themselves at risk if we are asking them to, to decide between driving and breaking the law or feed their children. So having that immigrant, English learner lens in everything that we do, particularly in Georgia, right? In other states like California, Texas, our community has been there for, generations. The line crossed us. We didn't cross, the line. But in Georgia, I think that's extremely, extremely important. And the, consistent and long-lasting, intentional commitment to work with community organizations as, key partners in this work, I think is critical. So those are my recommendations.
Thank you, Gigi. And I have a few things to add to Elizabeth. So at the Latin American Association, we do have an area that's for youth services. And there's two things. So one is we definitely try to meet the parents where they are. I talked a little bit about, using WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger. That has been a form of communication that was way long before COVID, where we would communicate with parents because that was the easiest for them and that's what they know. They talk a lot with families outside the country. I know my family does. They use WhatsApp a lot. The second piece is what we're seeing too is parents want to be involved with their kids' schooling and their education. It's just the language barrier that is creating a situation where they just don't know exactly what to do or they don't understand it. And so that's what's creating that piece that it can make it a little more difficult. So, it could be working, translations. I know, for example, at LAA, we're trying to see how we can create more translation or translators in the school system to help with that, and help to, again, minimize that barrier that parents are facing so that kids do feel that support from their parents, because really it is kind of triangle, right? For a child in school, it starts with the child, the parent, and the teacher, and they all work together for the success of the student. So that's, one of the pieces that, I think that's what's worked for the LAA. And again, the communication is number one, with wherever they can meet. So thank you so much. So Gigi, we have another question for you. It's from Concha. Gigi, can you please repeat the percentages and groups represented in the undocumented entrepreneur population? Gracias.
The percentages and groups represented. Sure. Let me pull up my report here so that I don't make any mistakes. Percentages. Okay. So I guess 64%, 63.8% have a bank account. They are, the people that apply come from seven different countries: Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Venezuela, Colombia, and Peru. Oh, there it is. 31% have higher education degrees. Well, you can see that, and we're also happy to share this document with you all if interested. 100% have dependent, and 73% are women. Again, just a clarification. This is data from the applicants from our program. This is not a census or necessarily, reflected. It hasn't been weighted by census data or anything like that, in Georgia. So this is just reflective of our particular effort. However, we are unaware of any other efforts in the state specific to undocumented entrepreneurs. So right now, this is the one piece of data that we can share with you. I think at large, undocumented folks in Georgia, we don't have clarity on their demographics, meaning, there is a lot of, immigrants that are Asian and, Black, from the African diaspora, from Southeast Asia, Africans, immigrants, come from different nationalities and backgrounds. So it's not only Latinx, right? But I think another point is that if we anticipate that, TPS and DACA are completely going to be terminated next year, the number of undocumented folks is going to grow tremendously, right? Only in Georgia, we have over 20,000 DACA recipients. And if the program is completely terminated, that's 20,000 new people that will be undocumented.
Thanks, Gigi. I appreciate that. And then Elizabeth did mention those insights are powerful. Thank you. About the school. So can either of you speak to how long and short-term savings can affect the economic mobility?
Sure. Well, I can tell you that in our surveys, we saw that Latinos were also the group that were less likely to have some savings or an emergency fund. Only a few of them said that they had enough money to last for a few months without an income. So in the case where they lose a job and they lose income, they are clearly the most affected of the groups in the US, and that could have long-term repercussions for many families.
Thank you, Ana. Gigi, do you have any other insight into that as well?
No, I would only add, anecdotal information that when we started doing the financial assistance in, Vecinos of Before Highway, which is another nonprofit that we work with very closely, they did a survey on the folks that were surveying, and 83% of all of these families, hundreds of families along Before Highway, didn't have enough money to pay May, because they said they had already used their $200 or whatever savings they had to pay April. So already in May, people had completely used their savings. So no savings.
Absolutely. We've seen that as well. And Gigi, she's heard me talk a little bit about this too, but, at the LAA prior to COVID, we would get maybe 50 phone calls a week or so of people needing assistance. Actually, since March, we're well over 10,000. I'd say within the past month or two, we've gotten close to 4,000 phone calls of people needing assistance. I think now there's more layoffs than there were, during the summer, and, more companies are now doing even more. So, it's going to be a challenging time, I think, for a little while. Absolutely. And just as a reminder, everyone, if you have any other questions, please feel free to, write in the chat. We've had some great ones, and we want to make sure that we can, answer any questions y'all have. And Gigi just shared a document for Undocumented Entrepreneurs Report, and you can click on that and check it out. So, Elizabeth asked some great questions. Concha asked, another great question. So what are some resources that those watching at home can use to learn more about some of the topics that we've discussed today?
Well, I would definitely recommend our website where you can find all the reports that we have done about COVID-19 and also about Latinos in general and their impact on Latinos. Our website is www.pewresearch.org. And if you're only interested in Hispanics, then you can do a /Hispanic to look into our research just for the Latino research that we did.
Perfect, thank you. And what if people want to get involved to, help with research? Is there any volunteering that people can do?
We don't really do volunteering. We do have internships every year. This year we actually canceled them because they were going to be virtually and we didn't know how to go about that. But next year for sure, during the summer, we'll have interns coming in to dip their toes into research with us.
And what about Latinos that want to help with the research, like giving their opinions and their experiences?
We always do surveys in a random way. So you might or might not get recruited to participate in our panels or our surveys. And we really appreciate people who take the time to do that for us. Okay,
thank you. Rosa said, or any documents that can be translated virtual. I don't know if that was on Anna's question, but she wrote that as you were talking. Rosa, if you want to ask a question there, we're happy to answer. So Gigi, what do you think about, how can other people get involved or find resources at home?
I always visit the Pew Research Center, so doubling down on that. I think there was also a study done by Axios that was built on census data around, precisely on businesses laws because of COVID, where we learned that, 32% of all Latino businesses basically disappeared after COVID, and 36% of immigrant businesses. So those are pretty significant numbers. You know, over 1 million businesses have already disappeared nationally. I don't have local data. I couldn't find it. I did look for this presentation, for this panel. But I think that if you are interested in you know, the NALCAP study, I think it's also very interesting, although it doesn't touch Georgia, it touches other states. And I think that in general, you know, we always try to put materials and information that we find that, you know, helps people, you know, with opportunities for volunteer and engagement in our social media. Our website is lcfgeorgia.org, and we are always looking for engagement and volunteers right now to encourage people to go out and vote and participate in the census. You still have time. If you want to participate in surveys, the census is the best one, that is the no census. But we will be doing some data collection on the impact of COVID in Latinx and immigrant communities, probably after the election and until February. So we'll be doing some of that work, and I'm happy to share my email too if people are interested. You know, I can send specific information depending on what they are interested in.
Sure, thank you, Gigi. If you can write your email in the chat, that would be great.
Sure.
So Rosa just asked, are there virtual ways of volunteering? And also thank you for your part in this work. Truly appreciate you all. Thank you, Rosa, that's very sweet.
Yes, text banking. Do you want to text bank, talk to people? Happy to do it. My email is there. We're texting 500,000 people in Georgia. We're already more than halfway, but we'll take over always, you know, more volunteers. We're also going to be working in Know Your Rights for the election, for people to feel comfortable, know what the rights are. We are going to be training interpreters to be available at polling locations. In Georgia, only Gwinnett County offers, you know, materials in Spanish. So every other one of the 150 counties that we have, 54 counties, does not have information in Spanish. So we want to make sure that people are trained so that they can volunteer and support their community members, so that they can, you know, participate and use, you know, the right to vote for those that can vote. So, and of course, you don't have to be a citizen to volunteer to participate with us, but you have to be a citizen and register to vote in this election.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gigi. And Rosa, I'll also comment about a few others. You know, of course, at the Latin American Association, we're doing food drives right now, or food distributions. We're calling it the Hunger Relief Program. And then we also, I'm sure there's opportunities with Ser Familia, which is also local, and Los Vecinos is another one that has been doing some food drive and some other, you know, events where they have volunteering. Gigi, can you think of a few others, or did I nail the major ones?
Yes, so we have a website called Unidos Georgia. It's in Spanish, but I'll put it here, unidosgeorgia.com, where we try to, you know, include a lot of the organizations doing COVID relief, COVID mitigation, and the areas that they serve. And so, you know, you can reach out to any of them. You can also donate to any of them if you're interested in supporting their work. The website is bilingual, but it's mostly in Spanish. So it's available for anybody, you know, to visit or to recommend, to refer if you know someone in need of help.
Well, thank you, Gigi. And I put my email there as well. And, you know, if anybody needs any help, but Gigi knows, you know, anything and everything Latinos in Georgia. Absolutely. Great partner of ours. And I've been getting to know Gigi as well. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you to our panelists. We truly appreciate your time and helping us get a little more insight into the economic impact of COVID-19 on Latinos. And thank you to everyone that's joined us today. You know, it was very impactful for me. I learned a lot, so I hope you did too. And again, you know, there's information in the chat, so please feel free to, you know, click on those links and save them, and Gigi's email as well. And then thank you to the National Center for Civil and Human Rights for helping us, you know, get the message out about, you know, the impact again of COVID-19 on Latinos. So thank you so much, and I will, you know, hand it over back to Cam.
Jessica, thank you so much for moderating today. Gigi, Anna, thank you so much for being with us. This was a wonderful conversation. We do have some actions that people at home can get involved with. You can donate to the Latino Community Fund to support Georgia Latinos. The website's right there. Of course, explore more of the Pew Research Center's data and become an ambassador for the Campaign for Equal Dignity. And we're inviting you to invite 10 friends today to join the campaign. So we're hoping that you're able to do that. Again, thank you everyone who joined us today, as well as our moderator and panelist. This was outstanding. And don't forget, October is a free month at the center, so get your tickets reserved. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.